Christmas of 2022 was supposed to be chaos, but the good kind. My wife's entire extended family rented a massive 3-story lodge in the mountains of Aspen. 25 people under one roof. Cousins, uncles, kids, dogs. The house was loud, smelling of roasted garlic, pine needles, and expensive wine. That sensory overload is important. It's the only reason he got away with it for so long. I first noticed him around 4 p.m. I was in the kitchen, carving the ham. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a man sitting in the grand living room, squeezed onto the arm of a leather sofa. He was wearing a thick, woolen Christmas sweater, red with white reindeers. It looked vintage, maybe a bit moth-eaten. He held a plate of appetizers, eating with a strange, frantic intensity. Crackers, cheese, grapes, shoving them into his mouth like he hadn't eaten in days. I nudged my brother-in-law, Mark. "Who's the guy in the reindeer sweater? Is that Sarah's new boyfriend?" Mark glanced over, sipping his beer. "I think so. Or maybe he's with Uncle Jerry. Jerry brought a few neighbors from the other cabin." We shrugged. In a house this full, you assume everyone belongs. 2 hours passed. The sun went down, and the snowstorm outside turned the windows into black mirrors. We started the gift exchange. The living room was packed. I found myself standing next to the man again. He was taller than I thought, looming. He wasn't speaking to anyone. He was just watching. And then I noticed the smell. Underneath the scent of food and perfume, there was something else radiating from him. Damp wool, stale sweat, and something metallic, like old pennies. My niece, barely 5 years old, ran up to him holding a new toy. "Look," she squealed. The man looked down. He didn't smile. He didn't coo. He bared his teeth. It wasn't a smile. It was a mimicry of a smile, too wide. His eyes remained dead flat. "Look," he repeated. His voice was raspy, dry as sandpaper. "Look." A cold knot tightened in my stomach. I walked over to my mother-in-law, the matriarch of the family. "Martha, who is that man?" She squinted. "I thought he came with you, David." I asked my wife. I asked Uncle Jerry. Nobody knew him. Suddenly, the noise of the party faded into a buzz. I realized with terrifying clarity, there is a stranger in our house. And he's been here for 4 hours, playing with our kids, eating our food. I signaled Mark and my father-in-law. We approached him from 3 sides, trying not to cause a panic. "Excuse me," I said, keeping my voice firm. "Can we help you with something?" The man stopped chewing. He slowly turned his head. His pupils were blown wide, black swallowing the blue. "The heating is very good here," he whispered. "Better than the crawl space." Before I could process that, he lunged, not at us, but towards the patio doors. He moved with shocking speed, shattering the glass latch and sprinting out into the blizzard. We chased him to the edge of the woods, but he vanished into the whiteout. The police arrived an hour later. They didn't find him, but they found where he came from. In the basement of the rental lodge, behind the boiler, they found a nest. Old blankets, candy wrappers, and photos. Polaroid photos taken from the vents, looking down into the bedrooms. He hadn't crashed the party. He had been living in the house for weeks before we even arrived. He was just waiting for us to cook him Christmas dinner. I've driven the night route from El Paso to Albuquerque for 6 years. I know every pothole on Highway 54. But Christmas Eve of 2019 is the reason I don't drive at night anymore. It was a skeleton crew, Just me and 6 passengers. An old lady, a young couple, and a guy in the back who looked like he was coming down from a meth high. Around 2 a.m., miles from civilization, the bus lurched. A violent metallic crunch came from the rear axle, and we skidded to a halt on the icy shoulder. The engine died instantly. Silence. Just the wind howling across the desert scrub. "Folks, sit tight," I announced, grabbing my flashlight. Probably just a blown tire. I stepped out into the freezing air. It wasn't a tire. A massive coil of barbed wire had been stretched across the road. It was tangled deep in the drivetrain. This wasn't an accident. It was a trap. I ran back to the bus door, adrenaline spiking. "Lock the doors," I shouted to the passengers. "Nobody opens this door." As I scrambled into the driver's seat, I saw them. Far off in the desert darkness, flashlight beams flickered on. 3 of them, then 4, then 6. They weren't on the road. They were walking through the sagebrush coming from the hills, approaching the bus from all sides. "Call 911, I yelled at the young couple. "No signal," the girl whispered, her voice trembling. The figures emerged from the dark. They weren't ghosts. They were men in heavy Carhartt jackets and ski masks. They held crowbars and bats. They didn't run. They walked slowly, methodically, like they had done this 100 times. The meth guy in the back started banging on the window. "Let me out! I'm not dying in here!" "Sit down!" I roared. The first impact shook the entire bus. Wham! Someone swung a bat at the glass door. The safety glass spiderwebbed but held. Wham! Another hit on the side window. We huddled in the center aisle, away from the glass. For 20 minutes, it was absolute hell. The sound of metal on metal, glass cracking, and men laughing outside. They were taunting us, testing the perimeter, looking for a weak point. Then suddenly it stopped. The banging ceased. The laughing died down. I crawled to the front and peeked out. Blue and red lights were flashing in the distance. A state trooper was coming down the highway. The men scattered into the darkness like roaches. By the time the officer pulled up, they were gone. The cop told us it was a local gang initiated into robberies by stranding vehicles. But that wasn't the scary part. The next morning, when the tow truck lifted the bus, they found something taped to the undercarriage near the fuel tank. A GPS tracker. That wire wasn't random. They knew exactly which bus was coming. And they knew exactly where the signal would die. If you live in the Pacific Northwest, you know about U-cut Christmas tree farms. Thousands of acres of pine trees arranged in perfect, endless rows. It's easy to lose your sense of direction in there, even in daylight. It was December 23rd. I was late getting a tree, as always. I drove out to a massive farm called Miller's Pines, about an hour before sunset. The guy at the gate waved me in. "We close at dark," he shouted. "Don't go past the red flags." I drove my truck deep into the property, looking for the perfect noble fir. I parked and walked into the rows with my handsaw. The air was crisp and smelled of pine resin. I walked further than I intended, row after row of identical trees. Before I knew it, the sun had dipped below the horizon. The twilight turned the trees into dark, jagged silhouettes. I found a good tree and started sawing. That's when I heard the digging. Thump, scrape, thump. It was coming from 2 rows over. I figured it was another customer or maybe a worker planting saplings. "Hey," I called out, just being friendly. "Getting a late start too." The digging stopped instantly. Silence. Not even the wind. I felt a weird instinct to be quiet. I slowly crouched down and peered through the branches of the trees. About 30 feet away in a clearing, there was an old pickup truck with its lights off. 2 men stood by a freshly dug hole. But they weren't planting a tree. They were dragging something from the truck bed, something wrapped in a plastic tarp. It was long, the size of a person. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard, I thought they could hear it. I watched as they rolled the bundle into the hole. One of the men paused. He looked up, scanning the trees. He was wearing a Santa hat, which somehow made it terrifying. "I heard a voice," he said. His voice was calm, professional. The other man grabbed a shovel. "Check the rows, I'll finish here." I didn't wait. I crawled on my hands and knees, dragging my saw. I knew if I stood up, my silhouette would give me away. I moved through the mud, slithering under the low branches. I heard boots crunching on the frost nearby. A flashlight beam swept over the trees above my head. "Here, kitty kitty," the man whispered. He was close enough that I could smell his cigarette smoke. I managed to reach a drainage ditch and slid into the freezing water. I lay there, submerged up to my nose, shivering violently, while the beam of light passed over me. I laid there for an hour until I heard their truck drive away. I ran back to my car and sped out of there, blowing through the closed gate. I went straight to the sheriff. They went back that night with dogs. They found the hole. Inside, there wasn't a body. It was empty. The men had realized they were watched and moved it. But they found something else. Stuck to a tree branch right above where I had been hiding in the ditch was a piece of red flannel fabric, torn from a Santa hat. He knew I was there. He looked right at me in the water. And for some reason, he decided to let me go. Or maybe he just wanted me to wonder when he'd come for me.